The large house stood quiet most of the day. Its walls were tall, clean, and cold, like they had been built to keep emotions out as much as people in. Inside, everything looked perfect, yet something was missing. The man who owned the house had everything money could buy, but his days felt empty. He had learned long ago that people often showed their true faces only when they thought no one important was watching. He had been sick for a few days. Nothing serious, just enough to make his body weak and his mind restless. Doctors came and went, leaving behind advice and medicines. Staff members moved around the house silently, doing their duties without much warmth. To them, this was just work. To him, it was another reminder that trust was hard to find. That morning, a new maid arrived. She was young, thin, and nervous. Her clothes were simple and worn, but clean. Her eyes showed fear mixed with determination. She had been sent by an agency after the previous maid left without notice. He barely looked at her when she was introduced. He had learned not to get attached, not to expect anything good too soon. From the first hour, he noticed small things about her. She worked quietly, careful not to make noise. She didn't touch anything unnecessary. She didn't look around with curiosity or greed. Still, he told himself not to judge too early. Appearances often lied. As the day passed, his headache returned. He lay down on his bed, staring at the ceiling. Thoughts filled his mind. Over the years, he had helped many people. Some were thankful, but most changed the moment they felt comfortable. Lies, theft, and fake loyalty had become common in his life. That was why he had created a habit. When someone new entered his world, he tested them. Not to hurt them, but to protect himself. That afternoon, he decided to do it again, when he heard the maid cleaning nearby. He closed his eyes and slowed his breathing. He placed his medicine bottle beside the bed, untouched. His body stayed still like he was in deep sleep. The room was quiet except for the sound of a clock on the wall. From where she stood, the maid noticed he was lying down. She stopped moving for a moment. She wasn't sure what to do. This was her first day, and she didn't want to make a mistake. Slowly, she stepped closer, careful not to wake him. She looked at his face, pale and tired. Then she stepped back and continued her work. As she cleaned, she spoke softly to herself, almost like whispering. She didn't know he could hear every word. She talked about how grateful she was to have this job, about how she had searched for work for weeks, about her mother, who was sick and waiting at home, about unpaid rent and borrowed money. Her voice shook at times, but she didn't complain. She sounded tired but hopeful. Lying there, the man felt something move inside him. It had been a long time since he had heard someone speak so honestly. Without acting or pretending, the maid noticed the medicine bottle again. She hesitated. She didn't know the rules of the house yet. Still, she gently picked it up and read the label slowly. She went to the kitchen and returned with a glass of warm water. She placed it beside the bed quietly, then stepped away. She didn't wake him. She didn't call anyone. She simply made sure everything was ready if he needed it. Hours passed. At one point, she sat on the floor near the door to rest. She looked exhausted. Her hands were rough, showing years of hard work. She rubbed her eyes and took a deep breath. Then she stood up again and continued cleaning. Even though no one was watching, the man stayed still, his heart beating louder than before. He realized this test was already different. Most people became careless when they thought he was asleep. Some searched drawers. Some talked badly. Some relaxed too much. This girl did none of that. As evening came closer, sunlight entered the room through the curtains. The maid finished her work and stood quietly for a moment, looking at the room. She folded her hands, as if praying, then turned to leave. Before walking out, she looked back at him once more, with concern in her eyes. That look stayed with him. He opened his eyes only after she left the room. He stared at the ceiling again, but his thoughts were different now. For the first time in a long while, he felt unsure. Not about her, but about himself. He wondered how many honest people he might have misunderstood in the past. Outside, the maid washed her hands and prepared to leave for the day. She didn't know she had just been watched during one of the most important moments of her life. She only knew she had done her job the best she could. Inside the room, the man sat up slowly and reached for the glass of water. It was still warm. He held it in his hand and smiled faintly. The test had already begun. But the real story was only starting. The next morning, the house was calm. With the sunlight streaming through the tall windows and painting soft golden lines across the polished floors, the man sat in his chair near the window, wrapped in a blanket, still thinking about the maid and the quiet way she had moved around the house the day before. He felt a mixture of curiosity and caution. He wanted to know more about her, but he also wanted to be sure she was someone he could trust. Trust had become rare in his world. The maid arrived promptly, carrying her small bag and wearing the same simple clothes as yesterday. She looked more confident now, though her steps were careful, as if she did not want to make a single wrong move. She greeted the staff politely and started her work. The man watched her from a distance, pretending to be busy with his morning routine. He observed how she organized the room, how she moved furniture slightly to clean underneath, and how she placed everything back neatly, without any haste or carelessness. After a while, she noticed his bed, neatly made but still with his pillow slightly indented from where he had lain the day before. Something in her eyes softened, a quiet concern. She wondered how someone who had everything could still be so lonely and unwell. She thought about her own life, about the struggles she faced every day, and about her mother who had been sick for months. These thoughts filled her mind as she continued her work. The man had made a decision. He wanted to hear her speak freely, to know what she truly thought and felt, without fear or hesitation. So he sat quietly in his chair, pretending to read a book, but really listening to every small sound. He watched her face as she moved around the room, noticed the small expressions that told stories she did not speak aloud. There was a careful gentleness in her actions that he had not seen in many people who had worked for him before. At one point, she paused and leaned on a chair for a moment, catching her breath. She touched the table lightly, ran her fingers over the clean surface, and whispered softly to herself, talking about her worries. She spoke about her mother's health, about the money she still needed to pay for their small rented home, and about how hard it was to find a job that treated people fairly. Her voice was quiet, almost like a song she didn't want anyone to hear. Yet he heard everything. Each word made him feel a strange warmth in his chest, a feeling he had almost forgotten. She then moved to the kitchen, picking up a small piece of bread left on the counter. She carefully wrapped it in a clean cloth, planning to save it for herself later. Her movements were thoughtful, deliberate, showing that she considered every step she took. The man noticed that she did not take anything that did not belong to her. She did not look around greedily. She did not touch anything she was not supposed to. He realized that honesty was something rare, but it shone clearly in her. Later, she saw a small tray with medicine on the bedside table. She paused, then gently moved it closer to the bed, just like she had done yesterday. She murmured something softly about how everyone needed care, even if they didn't ask for it. Her voice trembled a little, showing that she cared more than she had expected. She adjusted the blanket on the bed, making sure it looked neat and comfortable. As if she was taking care of someone she genuinely respected, the man felt a strong connection forming. Not in a loud or obvious way, but in the quiet understanding of what it meant to care for someone without expecting anything in return. He remembered all the people he had met in his life who had pretended to be kind, only to take advantage later. This young maid was different. She had not been taught by anyone to do the right thing. She had acted out of her own sense of morality as the morning passed. She continued her chores, moving from room to room with careful precision. The man noticed how she handled small accidents gently, cleaning spills without showing frustration. She talked to herself softly, planning her next task, showing her worries, sometimes smiling at small memories she had brought from home. He realized that even though she lived a hard life, she had a strong spirit and a kind heart. At one point, she found a small flower on the windowsill and smiled. Picking it up and placing it in a tiny vase she found in the kitchen, she looked around to see if anyone was watching, then whispered to herself about how small things could bring happiness. The man, sitting quietly, felt a deep sense of admiration. He had not expected to see such thoughtfulness in someone who had just come from a life filled with struggle. When lunchtime arrived, she prepared a simple meal for herself. But she made sure to leave a little water and bread within reach of the man, just in case he needed it. Even though he had everything, he noticed her gesture and felt a strange warmth, realizing that care was not about money or status, but about the heart. The rest of the afternoon was spent in small moments of quiet observation. The man watched as she folded clothes neatly, arranged books, and tidied up every corner she touched. She worked without complaint, without hurry, and without expecting praise. Each action was a reflection of her character, something pure and genuine in a world that often demanded pretenses. When the day was almost over, she paused near the window and looked outside, thinking about her family. She touched her chest lightly, a gesture of hope and silent prayer. She was tired, but she had not allowed herself to be careless. She had maintained her dignity, her honesty, her kindness throughout the day. The man observing her from his chair felt a shift within himself. He realized that he had been wrong to doubt people for so long. He had seen a glimpse of something rare, a light that could not be faked or hidden. The maid had shown him that integrity and compassion could still exist, even in the harshest of circumstances. As she prepared to leave for the evening, he made a decision. Tomorrow, he would continue his quiet test, but he would do so with a new perspective. He would watch, not to catch her in a mistake, but to see more of the person she truly was. He understood that sometimes the simplest actions spoke the loudest, and the quietest gestures revealed the most about a person. That evening, she left the house with a small smile, unaware of the deep impression she had made. The man stayed by the window, looking out at the fading sunlight, feeling something he hadn't felt in years: hope. He knew that the story of that day was only the beginning, and that the choices she made, even unknowingly, would shape both of their futures in ways he could not yet imagine. The next day began like the previous ones. The sunlight streamed through the tall windows, casting soft shadows across the polished floors. The man sat quietly in his study, reading a newspaper, though his eyes often wandered toward the young maid as she moved about the house. There was a quiet curiosity in him, a growing sense that this person was different from anyone he had ever employed. The maid arrived promptly, her steps careful but confident. She greeted the staff politely and began her daily chores. Today, she seemed even more aware of the space around her, moving with gentle precision, as if she was trying to make the house not just tidy, but welcoming. She cleaned every corner, arranged the furniture, and even dusted the small decorative items with a careful hand. Each movement seemed intentional, and the man watched, fascinated by the grace in her simplicity. Mid-morning, while she was organizing the study, something caught her eye. On the floor, partially hidden under a rug, lay a small wallet. It was thick, and she could see the edges of bills peeking out. She picked it up and examined it carefully. The wallet was filled with cash, more than she had ever seen at once. Her heart raced, and for a moment, she thought of all the things she could do with that money: paying rent, helping her mother, and solving the problems that had weighed heavily on her mind for so long. She sat down on the floor, clutching the wallet tightly, her thoughts racing. She looked around the room as if anyone might be watching, but it was empty. The house was silent, the only sound, the faint ticking of a clock on the wall. She knew that taking the money would be easy. No one would ever know. Yet, something inside her hesitated. She remembered the small moments from the past 2 days, the care she had taken, the honesty she had shown, and the quiet dignity in her work. She had not done anything wrong to earn punishment, but she also knew that wrong choices could change everything in an instant. She opened the wallet slightly, feeling the crisp bills between her fingers. The temptation was strong, and her mind wandered to the struggles she had faced. She thought of her mother's illness, of the unpaid debts, and the long nights without proper food. Yet, alongside these thoughts, she felt a deep sense of responsibility. Taking the money would solve her problems temporarily, but it would not make her feel proud or at peace. She remembered the man lying in bed the day before, and the trust he had unknowingly placed in her by pretending to sleep. That small act of faith had shown her something important. Honesty could be its own reward. For a long time, She sat there, debating silently with herself. She thought of the possibilities and the consequences. She thought of the life she wanted for her mother and herself. She thought of the man, not as a wealthy employer, but as a human being who deserved care and respect. Slowly, she began to understand that her choices were not just about survival, but about character. She did not want to be someone who took advantage of trust, no matter how desperate she felt. Finally, she made a decision. With careful hands, she placed the wallet back on the table near the bed where it had likely been lost. She straightened it neatly, making sure it looked untouched. Then, she picked up a small piece of paper and wrote a note. She explained that she had found the wallet on the floor and placed it back where it belonged. She signed it with her initials and left it beside the wallet. Her hand trembled slightly, but her heart felt light. She knew she had made the right choice. The man, who had been observing quietly from the study, felt a surge of respect and admiration. He had wanted to see the true character of the people around him, but even he was surprised by the integrity she had shown. Most people, when faced with such temptation, would have acted differently, but she had chosen honesty and courage, and that choice changed something in him. After returning the wallet, she continued her chores as if nothing had happened. She washed the dishes, tidied the rooms, and even cleaned the kitchen thoroughly. Each action was performed with care and thoughtfulness. The man noticed the calmness in her demeanor, the quiet confidence that came from knowing she had done the right thing. Her simple actions, her careful consideration, and her respect for others' property revealed a strength that could not be measured in wealth or status. By mid-afternoon, she paused to rest for a moment. She looked out the window, thinking about her family and the life she was trying to build. She felt proud of herself, not because she had resisted temptation, but because she had chosen to act with integrity. She knew that her choices mattered, and that they would shape not only her own future, but also the way others saw her. The man, watching from the shadows, realized that this was a turning point. He had spent years surrounded by people who acted for personal gain, and he had learned to doubt everyone's intentions. But she had shown him that there were still people who acted out of goodness and decency. Her choice to return the wallet was a silent but powerful statement of her character, one that could not be ignored. As evening approached, the maid finished her chores and prepared to leave for the day. She did not mention the wallet or the note. She simply moved quietly through the house, her movements calm and deliberate. The man stayed in his chair, feeling a sense of hope he had not felt in years. He knew that her actions had already begun to change the energy in his home, and perhaps in his life as well. When she left, he finally spoke aloud, though only to himself. Acknowledging the quiet courage he had witnessed, he realized that life was full of tests, but the most important ones were not about wealth or power. They were about choices, honesty, and the strength to do what was right, even when no one was watching. Her simple act of integrity had reminded him of something he had long forgotten: the value of trust and the power of human goodness. That night, he reflected on the events of the day. He thought about the maid, her courage, her honesty, and her gentle heart. He knew that tomorrow would bring new moments to observe, but the impact of her choice would stay with him forever. It was a lesson in humility and understanding, in the quiet strength that comes from doing what is right. And so, the house once filled with silence and caution began to feel different. The presence of someone who acted with genuine care and integrity started to shift the atmosphere. The man knew that the story of that day would be remembered, not for the money or the temptation, but for the character that had been revealed in a quiet, unassuming way. It was a day that would mark the beginning of change for both of them. A day when a simple choice showed the power of honesty and the strength of the human heart. The next morning began quietly. As sunlight streamed into the house through the tall windows, casting long, gentle shadows across the polished floors, the man had been awake for some time, sitting in his chair and sipping tea. His mind was busy with thoughts, replaying the events of the past days. He had watched the maid carefully, tested her honesty, and now he felt an unusual warmth and respect for the quiet strength she had shown. When the maid arrived, she moved through the house with her usual care. She greeted the staff politely and began her chores, her eyes focused, her movements precise. She did not yet know that her simple act of returning the wallet had been observed. She worked with the same calm dedication, unaware that her choices had already started to change the man's perspective, and perhaps even his life. The man decided that today was the right day to reveal the truth. He wanted her to understand that he had known about her actions, and that he was grateful. It was not a test anymore. It was a chance to show that honesty and integrity mattered and were appreciated. He wanted to speak to her not as an employer, but as someone who had learned something important from her behavior. He called her to his study. When she entered, she noticed something different in his expression. There was a softness, a calm confidence that had not been there before. She felt a flicker of nervousness. She had always been careful, and now she wondered if she had done something wrong. She took a small step forward and bowed her head slightly in respect. "Sit down," he said gently, gesturing to the chair across from him. His voice was calm, not commanding. She hesitated for a moment, then sat, her hands folded neatly in her lap. "I want to talk to you about yesterday," he began. "I know what happened with the wallet. I know that you found it, and I know that you returned it. I want you to understand that I was not asleep. I saw everything." Her eyes widened slightly, and her breath caught in her throat. She had expected nothing, and now the truth was revealed. A mix of fear and relief washed over her. She had been honest because it was the right thing to do, not because she expected recognition or reward. "I didn't know," she whispered, her voice trembling. I thought it was the right thing," he smiled gently. "That is exactly why I wanted to see. I have been surrounded by people who act for their own gain, and I have learned to doubt everyone. But you acted out of integrity, without fear or hesitation. That is rare. That is why I wanted to see you truly, without the masks that most people wear." She looked at him, still processing the words. She had never been praised like this before, and she did not know how to respond. Her life had been full of struggle, and moments like this were few and far between. She felt a quiet pride, not in herself alone, but in knowing that she had acted rightly. He leaned back in his chair, studying her carefully. "I want you to understand something important," he continued. "Integrity is more valuable than wealth, and kindness is more powerful than fear. What you did yesterday has changed the way I see things. I want to offer you more than just a job. I want to offer you respect, and I want to support your family, if you allow me to do so." Her eyes filled with tears, but she blinked them away. She had never expected such words. She had worked hard for her family, done her best to survive, and now someone was offering help, not as charity, but as acknowledgement of her character. "I don't know what to say," she said softly. I did what I thought was right. I never thought it would matter so much." "It matters more than you can imagine," he replied. "Sometimes the smallest actions speak louder than the grandest gestures. What you chose yesterday is proof that honesty and courage still exist. I want to help you, not because I have to, but because you deserve it." She took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. Her mind raced with thoughts of her mother, her home, and the life she hoped to build. She realized that this moment was not just about her, but about the way people could connect through trust and respect. She nodded slowly. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for seeing me," he smiled. "I have seen you, and I want to make sure that what I have seen is not lost. From now on, you will have a better position here, fair pay, and the support you need for your family. Not as charity, but as recognition of your integrity." Her hands trembled slightly, but her heart felt full. She had faced many difficult days, but this was unlike anything she had experienced before. She felt a sense of hope she had not known in years. She understood that her choices had truly mattered. As the day continued, she went about her work with a new sense of purpose. The man observed her, feeling a deep sense of connection and gratitude. He realized that the story of the wallet, the choices, and the quiet courage had created a turning point for both of them. Trust, respect, and honesty had bridged the gap between their worlds, and the atmosphere in the house felt lighter, warmer, and more alive. By evening, they had spoken at length about her family, her hopes, and the struggles she had faced. He offered guidance and support, not as an authority figure, but as someone who had learned to value the character she had shown. They had shared a rare moment of understanding, the kind that changed not only the present, but also the possibilities for the future. When she left the house that evening, she felt a quiet pride and a deep sense of gratitude. The man watched her go, knowing that their lives had shifted in meaningful ways. Her choice, made quietly and with integrity, had not only shaped her own path, but had also transformed his perspective, bringing warmth, hope, and trust back into his life. The house, once silent and cautious, now felt alive with the energy of human connection. The man knew that moments like these were rare and precious. He had learned that the heart's choices, even the quietest ones, could change destinies. And in that moment, he understood that the story of yesterday was only the beginning of something greater, something built on honesty, trust, and the simple yet profound power of doing what is right. The days that followed were different from anything either the man or the maid had experienced before. The atmosphere in the house had shifted, and a quiet warmth filled the rooms that had once been cold and distant. The man watched as the maid went about her work, not just with diligence, but with a calm confidence that seemed to bring life to every corner she touched. Her presence had a subtle effect on everyone around her, from the other staff members to the small plants on the windowsills. As if honesty and kindness could influence everything, the maid, now aware that her actions had been seen and appreciated, worked with a renewed sense of purpose. She no longer felt the weight of suspicion or fear that often accompanied her previous jobs. She cleaned, organized, and tended to the house with careful precision, but also with small gestures of thoughtfulness that reflected her heart. She left little notes for the staff, adjusted the furniture slightly to make the rooms more comfortable, and always made sure that even small details, like the placement of a cup or the folding of a blanket, were done with care. The man observed quietly, realizing that her simple acts of integrity had created ripples far beyond what either of them could measure. He saw how she treated the other staff with respect, never demanding, never complaining, yet always setting an example of honesty and reliability. Slowly, he began to trust people again, not blindly, but with a measured hope that the world still held those who acted from the goodness of their hearts. One afternoon, he called her into his study. She approached cautiously, unsure of what he wanted, though she no longer feared punishment. He gestured for her to sit, and she complied, folding her hands neatly in her lap. He looked at her and smiled, a rare expression that reflected both relief and admiration. "I wanted to tell you how much your actions have meant," he began. "Not just yesterday, but every day since you arrived. You have shown me that there are still people who act with honesty, with courage, and with compassion. Your choices have changed not only how I see others, but how I see myself." Her eyes widened slightly, and she felt a warmth in her chest. She had worked hard, and though she had hoped her efforts mattered, she had never imagined they could have such an impact. She smiled faintly, feeling both pride and humility. "I only did what I thought was right," she said softly. "I never expected anything in return. That is exactly why it matters," he replied. "It is the nature of your integrity, your honesty, and your courage that makes it so powerful. People often act for reward, but you acted because it was right. That is the lesson I will carry with me always." Days turned into weeks, and the changes in the household were subtle but profound. The staff began to mirror her behavior, showing more care, more honesty, and more thoughtfulness in their work. The man, too, found himself inspired to act differently, more patiently, more kindly, more openly. He began to support honest workers from poor backgrounds, offering them opportunities that he had never considered before. He realized that the choice of one person, acting quietly and rightly, could transform not just one life, but an entire environment. The maid's life also began to change in practical ways. Her pay improved, allowing her to provide better care for her mother and a safer home for herself. But more than money, she felt a new sense of dignity and self-respect. She realized that her honesty and integrity were not just virtues, but tools that shaped her future. Her actions had consequences, and they had been noticed by someone capable of creating meaningful change. Over time, The man and the maid developed a relationship built on mutual respect and understanding. They spoke often, sharing small stories, thoughts, and reflections. She did not see him only as her employer, and he did not see her merely as a worker. They saw each other as humans capable of learning, growing, and making a difference. Their conversations, filled with honesty and thoughtfulness, strengthened the trust between them. As the sun set and painted the room with soft orange light, the man reflected on the journey that had begun with a simple test. He thought about the wallet, the decision to return it, and the quiet courage she had shown. He understood that it was not wealth, power, or influence that defined a person, but the choices made in small, unobserved moments. The maid had reminded him that integrity was not just a moral ideal but a living force that could shape reality. The maid, sitting quietly in the kitchen, felt the same reflections. She thought about her own struggles, the moments of fear and temptation, and the choice she had made.
Ow.
She realized that it had not just changed her life materially, but had given her a sense of purpose and a deep connection to someone who valued her true self. Her choice had rippled outward, creating change that neither she nor the man could have predicted. Months passed, and the household continued to thrive under the quiet influence of honesty and kindness. The man's trust in people grew tempered by experience, but strengthened by the example set by the maid. She continued her work, her life enriched by new opportunities, and her spirit uplifted by the acknowledgement of her integrity. The story of that wallet, that simple choice, became a quiet legend in the household. It was not spoken aloud often, but it influenced every action, every decision, every small gesture of care. The man often reflected on that day, knowing that it had changed not only his perspective, but also the very nature of his home. The maid's simple act had altered his fate, bringing hope, trust, and a renewed sense of humanity into his life. In the end, they both understood a truth that transcended wealth, status, circumstance. The choices we make in quiet, unobserved moments define who we are. The maid had chosen integrity, courage, and kindness, and in doing so had changed both her life and his. Their lives were intertwined not by wealth or obligation, but by the simple, enduring power of human goodness. A reminder that even the smallest act of honesty can have a profound and lasting impact. The days that followed the maid's honest decision to return the wallet became a turning point in the life of the household. The man, who had once been skeptical of everyone around him, started to see that the world could be full of people capable of goodness and integrity. The house, which had always been filled with quiet efficiency and a sense of caution, now seemed warmer, lighter, and more alive. Even the smallest corners seemed to carry the energy of honesty and care. The maid arrived every day, with a quiet determination, her movements now even more assured. She no longer hesitated or second-guessed herself. The work she did was meticulous, but more importantly, it carried a subtle kindness that touched everyone she interacted with. She would straighten the curtains, wipe surfaces gently, and even leave small notes for the other staff with words of encouragement. Her presence changed the dynamics of the household, making it feel like a home rather than just a large building filled with tasks and chores. The man observed all of this with growing admiration. He realized that integrity and dedication could inspire others without a single spoken word. The maid's actions had shown him that character was not measured by wealth, authority, or education, but by the choices made when no one is watching. He had begun to trust people in a way he never thought possible, allowing hope and optimism to re-enter his life. One morning, he decided to spend more time observing her work quietly, not as a test, but out of genuine interest. He saw her carefully, arranging the kitchen, washing the dishes, and checking the pantry. Her attention to detail was remarkable, but it was the care behind her actions that moved him. Each step she took seemed thoughtful, deliberate, and full of consideration for others. She even cleaned areas that most people overlooked, showing that she valued not just the results, but the effort and intention behind them. During a quiet moment, she paused near the window, watching the sunlight fall across the garden. She seemed to take a deep breath and let herself feel the calm and warmth of the day. The man noticed the way she reflected on her surroundings, her face thoughtful and serene. He understood that this was not just work for her. It was a way of living, a way of showing respect for herself, the space around her, and the people she served. He called her into the study that afternoon. She approached cautiously as always, but there was a newfound confidence in her steps. He gestured for her to sit across from him, and she did so politely, folding her hands neatly. He looked at her with a gentle smile and said, "I wanted to talk about how things are going, not as an employer, but as someone who has seen the impact of your choices." She looked at him curiously, unsure of what to expect. He continued, "Your actions over the past few weeks have not gone unnoticed. They have changed the way I see this household, the staff, and even myself. You have inspired others by example, and you have reminded me that there is still goodness in the world. That is a rare gift." She blushed slightly, feeling shy but proud. "I only do what I think is right," she said softly. "I never expected it to matter so much." "That is exactly why it matters," he replied. "It is not because you sought recognition or reward, but because your choices come from a place of honesty and integrity. That is something few people have, and it is something I value greatly." The maid felt a quiet warmth spread through her chest. She had worked hard, faced challenges, and made difficult choices, but hearing that her actions had meaning beyond herself was both surprising and fulfilling. She realized that her life was beginning to change in ways she had never imagined. Over the next few weeks, the man took steps to support her further. He offered her guidance in managing her finances, helped her provide for her mother's health needs, and even arranged for her to learn new skills that could improve her future prospects. He did not do this as charity, but as recognition of her dedication and integrity. She had earned every bit of support through her own actions, and that fact made the assistance even more meaningful. The maid, in turn, felt a renewed sense of purpose. She approached her work with even greater care and thoughtfulness, not out of obligation, but out of pride and commitment to doing her best. She helped other staff members improve their own habits, offering small tips and encouragement. Her influence spread quietly, making the household a place of respect, trust, and collaboration. She understood that her choices were powerful, not just for her own life, but for the lives of everyone around her. One evening, as the sun set and painted the house with shades of gold and orange, the man reflected on the changes that had taken place. He thought about the first day she had arrived, the wallet she had returned, and the simple yet profound choices she had made. He realized that her integrity had not only shaped her own future, but had altered the atmosphere and energy of the entire household. Her influence had inspired him to become a better person, a more patient, understanding, and hopeful human being. The maid, sitting quietly by the window, reflected on her own journey. She thought about her struggles, her fears, and the moments when she had been tempted to take an easier path. She felt gratitude for having the courage to choose integrity, and for the opportunity to witness the positive changes that followed. She understood that even the smallest actions, when guided by honesty and goodness, could have a ripple effect far beyond what anyone could predict. Weeks turned into months, and the bond between the man and the maid grew stronger, built on mutual respect, trust, and understanding. They spoke often, sharing thoughts, experiences, and reflections. The household continued to thrive under the quiet influence of her example. Other staff members learned to act with care, honesty, and diligence. Inspired by her consistent behavior, the man also began to extend his support to others outside the household, offering opportunities to honest workers from similar backgrounds. He realized that the power of integrity could influence entire communities, and that the maid's choice had taught him the value of fostering trust and goodness in the wider world. The maid's life improved materially, but more importantly, it improved emotionally and spiritually. She gained a sense of dignity, pride, and self-respect that could not be measured in money. She understood that her choices mattered, and that by acting with integrity, she had influenced not only her own life, but the lives of others. Her courage, honesty, and kindness had set a chain of positive events in motion. Years later, the man would often recall the moment when she had returned the wallet. He realized that it was not the money or the test itself that had mattered, but the quiet, deliberate choice to do what was right. It had taught him lessons about trust, hope, and the enduring power of human goodness. The maid's simple act had changed his life, and in doing so, it shaped the lives of many others around them. The household continued to flourish, filled with warmth, respect, and genuine care. The man found himself happier, more patient, and more connected to the world. The maid found her life enriched with opportunity, dignity, and the quiet satisfaction of knowing that her choices had a lasting impact. Together, they had witnessed the profound truth that even small, honest actions can create waves of change, altering destinies and inspiring hope. In the end, both of them understood that life was shaped not just by wealth or status, but by integrity, courage, and the decisions made when no one is watching. The maid's choice to act rightly, quietly, and courageously had changed both their fates, reminding them that human goodness, once recognized and nurtured, could transform the world around it in ways unimaginable. It was a story of hope, trust, and the enduring power of a single honest choice.